and welcome to today's fireside chat, which is part of the land conversations that we're having at the Restoration Pavilion. When I was preparing for this session, I actually reflected a little bit more about the profound connection between humans and nature and how we shape it, and in turn, how nature shapes us as well. And today's discussion, which is on connecting humans and nature, lessons from restoration and storytelling, brings this idea to life. And our speaker, Juliano Salgado, embodies this connection through his remarkable work. Juliano is the chairman of the board of directors at Instituto Terra, where he leads the socio-environmental transformation of Brazil's Rio Doce basin. Beyond his impactful environmental work, Juliano is an accomplished filmmaker, blending creativity and advocacy to tell powerful stories about the human spirit and our relationship with this planet. His Academy Award nominated documentary, The Salt of the Earth, has inspired millions to think differently about nature and its role in our lives. Please join me in welcoming Juliano Salgado.
Thank you. Hello, how are you?
And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
When I was reading about your incredible body of work, I was really curious to know how you sort of blended cinema, law, and economics, and how has this really shaped your understanding of this connection between humans and nature?
You know, when I was very young, I think, 22 years old, I realized that I really didn't want to be working behind an office. I didn't want to be wearing one of those suits, every day. And so I decided, I understood that if I worked as a cinematographer, as a documentary filmmaker, I could be in between people and historical events that I would be commenting, and that I could help shape the narrative and the way people want to understand the world, and eventually could take action. And there was something that was eminently political about it, and that interested me a lot. Of course, we're speaking 1996, so it's before the internet, before social media. If I were young today, I probably wouldn't be a film director. I may want to be an influencer. I don't know.
But I'm sure through your work, you're already an influencer for all of us. And at G20 Global Land Initiative, especially, and through my colleagues Paula and Mateos, we've learned a lot about the work at Instituto Terra and your understanding or your achievements when it comes to Instituto Terra. How transformative has it been for the Rio Doce Basin? And what are some of the challenges and successes you have seen when it comes to the socio-environmental challenges?
So thank you for this question. The first thing about Instituto Terra is that we started restoration of forests, of an extremely biodiverse forest, about 28 years ago, in 1997. And when we started, it was way before anyone would worry about climate change. We could feel this was important, had to be done, but we started a long, long time ago. So we've had a very long learning curve, and it helped us understand that when you restore lands, it's not about the biodiversity only. We have 330 species planted, in the places that we have restored, which is 3 times more species than you will find in a country like Germany altogether. We have restored about 2,000 water sources and the water table. We have formed thousands of children. We have had more than 86,000 people that came with us to the workshops on how they could produce in a more sustainable way. It's not about specifically any of those actions. It's about all of those actions. It's not about transforming the land, restoring the water, planting trees, seeing those trees grow, and see how biodiversity is. It's about how you can manage to change the culture locally, how you can manage to bring with you people that have inherited from their grandparents, from their parents, practices that have destroyed the environment, that have, in our case, we've lost 40% of the amount of rain that we had only 20 years ago. And so our practice are really awful, but they are our practice. So how do you change a place culturally? How do we involve people in a way that they will willingly change their ways, embrace another vision of the world, and change their concepts of things, change their ideology? And so this is what we have started to do now.
It's very inspiring to hear about the power of collaboration that you spoke about, because when it comes to working on the ground, it's very important to have partnerships with indigenous communities to build that trust with them. We'd love to hear more about your stories. How did Instituto Terra build this trust with indigenous communities, with local communities, to foster this partnership?
Yes, so for me it's interesting because I did this film called The Salt of the Earth that was in the cinemas about 10 years ago. And that's this film that brought me to Cannes, to all sorts of festivals, ultimately to the Oscars. And this film was about my father, my family, and it actually spoke about Instituto Terra. And when I finished this film, I was transformed. I had looked into my own eyes, into the story of my family, my relationship with my land, with my father. And as a matter of fact, right after this film, I moved to Brazil for the first time. I grew up in France. My parents are from Brazil. They had created Instituto Terra. And when I came to Brazil, my first contact with Instituto Terra was visiting a little farm where we had restored two water sources. And the farmer was very, very proud. He was extremely proud because in that region, he was the only person who had accepted to sacrifice 1 hectare of a 10-hectare land to restore those water sources. And we were in the dry season, and his place was the only place where there was water running. And he was so proud. He was almost crying out of that. He brought us to this place. We went into the little forest that we had planted around each of his water sources. And from there, from up there, we could see that he had, planted a cacao and a coffee plantation, and a smaller coffee plantation by the bigger one. And we started asking him, very basic question. What did you do before? Well, before I had cattle, 6 cattle, and now I have, 5,000 cacao, 6,000 coffee plants, and I'm making much more money now than I used to do before. Say, wow, well, that's amazing, but you work more than you did before. I say, no, now I'm working less. I have time for myself. That's amazing. But then I looked at his plant and I see that this little coffee, plantation separated from the bigger one. And I ask him, what is this? And then he brings me, on the side and starts telling me really, in my ear, that not so long ago, his son, when he would leave school, they didn't have any money. He would stay in the little city and he got involved with the wrong people. And suddenly he was involved with the traffic and he was trafficking. And in Brazil, it's very serious because he had no money at all. And so because water had came back, because his land that was so small for his cattle was way too big for his plantation now, he had been able to take some of his crop of coffee to give the grains to his son who had planted them, and he had grown his own crop of coffee. And now he was making money. He was making his own money with that land that was too small before. And he was back at school and he was making a living now too. But his parents too were living there. And then I realized 3 generations of people were living on this land where, and in a much better way, in a place where only 1 generation of people was living. So I understood that our impact was very, very powerful. And we also understood at this point that we had an increase of revenue for this family that was about 30%, which is a lot. And at this point, that's about 10 years ago, we, um, we decided, that's when I got involved with Instituto Terra, and I understood this was very, very transformative. And we decided to bet, on those water restoration projects. And near us, the city of Pocrania, by the river of Corredeira, 5,000 inhabitants, was built by the river for obvious reason. And they were suffering a lot because at this point, the river had turned seasonal because of the lack of rain, because of the change, in the biodiversity, in the aridification of our place. And so we decided to concentrate our efforts in that river before it reaches that city, and to see if we could make a difference. A few years later, the river became permanent again. We had managed to save it because when we restored, about 100 water sources over there, the neighbors saw that it works, and all the community restored their water sources spontaneously. So we understood that when we can bring this transformative change, the neighbors will imitate, and we can change culture. And one day I'm back in this place with some Chinese investors that are helping us and showing them, the sparkle in the eyes of these people, on specifically of one of those farmers. And in Brazil, we have what we call a legal reserve. You need to have a forest in your farm, and the farmer is depicting this beautiful story, and his eyes are sprinkling, joy. And I'm super happy because our investors are, seeing, how powerful and how transformative it is. And then something goes off script completely. He tells me that he's cut everything under his forest. There's nothing growing there, and now he plants, he planted grass for his cattle, which is crazy. And I asked him, what's going on? What are you doing? Have you given up on your forest? He says, no. I heard that the most effective way of doing cattle is under the trees. I think it's called agropastoral. I said, yes, yes, it is. So you know about that? Yes, I saw that on TV and I decided to do it. So he was doing spontaneously something that demands a great technicity. You don't do it this way, so it was not going to work. But we understood that we could have an ideological impact on people. That from a people that were ultimately conservative, because whatever mistake they would do while changing their processes, whatever mistake could bring them to abandon the land and to go live in the periphery of a big city, of a neighboring big city. And we know in Brazil, those peripheries are very dangerous. They are not places where you want to raise your kids. You don't want to live there. No one wants to go there. People go there when they have to. And so they're very resistive to change because of that. But suddenly, water came back. We had all these programs, educational programs to our children, and the environmental, the environment, the context had changed, and people's ideology were changing too. And this gave birth to our massive program, what we're doing now, the Terra Doce program.
No, absolutely. I think hearing stories like this is what makes us realize the kind of mindset shifts that we see on the ground. And when we spoke about this a while earlier, and you were talking about how passionate you were about this program, we'd love to hear more about the Terra Doce program and the pillars on which it stands.
So the Terra Doce program is a program that we will implement in the next 10 years. So we started mid to 2023. It's a program that's where we're trying to provoke a cultural change. So we have a holistic approach on as small as possible territory. Our idea is that if we impact the water table, if we impact the water sources, if we impact the way children think and how they contribute to the way the adult thinks as well, if we impact youngsters, allowing them to better understand their environments and the political environment, the societal environments, allowing them to translate what they understand of the forces that drive their life through social media, and to communicate about that. If we are able to finance initially the creation of the conversion of 6,000 hectares to agroforestry, so the creation of a production process, a production chain of agroforestry products, cacao, coffee, cattle, meat, tan, milk, all of those products growing under the trees. And if we manage to convert the 6,000 hectares and to find markets for them, which we are already finding, for instance, during COP here, I think I found market for milk already. So I cannot tell you the identity of this huge French corporation, but we had a very interesting contacts, right? And so people believe in this. And if we manage to create these 6,000 hectares of agroforestry and to change the local culture, we know that in the following 5 years, completing 10 years, we will be able to convert another 12,000 of hectares with people that will be able to engage through small loans, calibrated loans, to allow for them to make more money than they would without converting to agroforestry while they're reimbursing their loans, but engaging into these processes. And when we have converted these 18,000 hectares of agroforestry in a very small place, when we have taught about 20,000 children, formed about 1,200 youngsters to these techniques of, citizenship communication through social media, when we have converted 18,000 hectares of agroforestry, when people will be better off, we know that this example will be an example that will be able to convert the neighboring community, the neighboring little town, and that this way of doing things, the culture will have changed. And we will be able to, in the next 20 years, transform about 2.5 million hectares that we need to transform if we want to bring rain back. And this is our goal. Our goal is to augment the GDP, is to change the local culture. By doing so, we will create a lot of value, value that will transform the life of people that need money, that need this. Really, our region is not a rich region. We need that in order to be able to transform our lives there. And we will be able to transform a region that's way bigger than our reach, than what we could do through cultural change.
Absolutely. And I think this also shows the kind of vision that Instituto Terra really has. And I'm very sure that the kind of impact that this project has had is truly remarkable when it comes to the global restoration efforts as well. So, according to you, what are some of the key takeaways when it comes to other projects around the world that they could emulate from this project?
I was very interested here to listen to what the global players had to say, the market players also had to say, and I have to tell you that I am very optimistic. I am optimistic because I'm seeing that we are managing to do what we are set to do in our little region. That's the size of Portugal, but compared to the world, it's very little. We think it's really big, but um, when I see that what we do is echoes very, very strongly to everything that I heard, to what your organization is saying, but to what all the other players are saying. So I'm positive that we are in the right tracks. I'm positive that we can, by doing what we are setting to do, we can invert the effects of global change. We can bring rain back. We can make life sustainable. And we can do that through tackling some of the major issues that we've never been able to tackle. We can tackle poverty in agricultural region. We can implement citizenship. We can implement, the self-understanding we all need in order to be able to go through change. So I'm really positive that this crisis can be an opportunity to have a happier planet in 20 years' time.
On that note, and before I open up to the audience, I don't think we can end this conversation without talking about your incredible documentary, Salt of the Earth. At G20 Global Land Initiative, we really believe that art and cinema has the power to change everything and create actual action on the ground. I'd love to hear about your thought process when it comes to storytelling and the power of storytelling.
Um, I think films they have a very powerful they are a very powerful tool to allow for the audience to enter someone else's perspective, someone else's subjectivity. And during the Salt of the Earth, I was making a movie about my father, so it was a very personal film. But Sebastio is one of the great witness of 40 years of story. He has witnessed it by meeting people that were the people the forgotten people from history, the people that didn't have a voice. And he would meet them and give them a voice through his photographies, right? And so he had a lot of things to say about these people, and this is the reason why we made this film. We knew that he had something to transmit that was very special, and his trajectory was also very special. The way that he found hope after his Rwanda episodes with the Instituto Terra was very powerful and could be very inspiring. And today, I'm making a movie about Sônia Guajajara. She's our first ever indigenous minister in Brazil. She has a very powerful story too. And my challenge now is to allow for the audience to enter the subjectivity of an indigenous woman who is fighting for survival, the survival of her culture, the survival of her people, and all of our survival as well. And the idea is that when you start watching the world through her own eyes, through that transportation that cinemas allow for, you will be able to bridge, prejudices, whether they're positive prejudices or negative prejudices. They're always, the different face of the same problem, and you will be able to start seeing the world through the eyes of the most important stakeholder, the most important group of person when you're speaking about protecting the most important forests we have in the world. So transportation, identification, and subjectivity is the role of cinema.
Absolutely. And we're also extremely happy to announce that we will be screening this film on Wednesday at 6 p.m., Salt of the Earth. So you're all welcome to attend. We do have time for a few questions from the audience.
Thank you. How is the coffee farmer's family doing? What's happened to the son? Is he still in the industry?
So yes, he's now got a much bigger coffee plantation. Since we restored water there, now we're implementing an agroforestry project with them. So he's growing trees, and we also work with Ely Coffee. They are a very innovative brand of coffee, and so we understood that when we connect the coffee plantation with forests, by using a green corridor, a forest corridor, the coffee quality increases dramatically. So when the animals they come to the coffee plantation, they will eat there, do all of the things that they do when they are there, and this has such an effect on coffee. This has such an effect on biodiversity as well, because through those implementation, we are now creating green corridors in a much more effective way. So we're discovering that the key takeaway from that is that we're discovering that we can use biodiversity in a way that we never thought it was possible to use. We always thought that agriculture was reproducing ad vomitum, the same object forever. And now we are understanding that we can use biodiversity to actually make a living, to grow foods, to have a better life, to have holidays at some point when we never had holidays before. And so, we're all understanding that together. And this young man, who is not so young anymore, he must be about your age now, 35, I'm guessing. He's a happier person, and he's a very balanced man. He's going to be father soon.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for being here. I mean, this was fantastic. I'm just curious, how do you select your stories? How do you select what you focus on?
Well, that's a very difficult thing, actually, selecting a story. For both films about Sebastio and about Sonia, they were kind of, it became obvious that those stories had to be told. Sebastio is my father, of course, so for me it was very, very personal, but I only could tell his story when I understood he's a great photographer. He's been showing his photo all around the world in exhibitions, magazines, books. When I understood that he had more to share than just the photo, that this film was not going to be a moving exhibition, but he had something else to share. I understood there was a point to make this film. And then we found, the dramatic structure. And for Sonia, it came from a different, it was an urgency. It was during the pandemic. Brazil was shut down. The social movements were shut down. The forest was burning. People were dying out of COVID because our government acted in a completely irresponsible way. And the only movements that dared mobilize, that dared, say stop, that put their life at risk in order to try to change things was the indigenous movements. And then it became obvious that, they had something that we had to make echo of their fights, that it was a very important fight. And when we got there, we discovered we were mesmerized to discover that this movement was led by a group of women. And that the main woman, the leader of this group, was a woman that's maybe 1 meter 50 centimeter high. She's super small, but she's the most intelligent person I've ever met. She has a capacity of forming people, forming quadrus, leaders, of bringing up people, of trusting them, of organization building. She has a vision. So we were in love with her, and we were gained by her, incredible charisma. And so it was evident we had to make this film. And then we found out, the technical things, the tree structure acts, and how we can convey the story in a way that the audience will accept it and maybe enjoy it and maybe transport into our subjectivity.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. But we'd love for you to take this conversation outside of the stage as well. Juliano will be here for a bit longer, so please feel free to ask him questions, to engage. And I hope you all join in for the preview of the film on Wednesday, next Wednesday from 6 p.m. We'd love to have you. And we also have other sessions at the Restoration Pavilion. You can just scan the QR code to the right, and we'd love to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you,
Thank you very
Juliano, for
much.
joining
Thank
us.
you
It
very
was
much.
lovely.
It's such a nice invitation. Thank you.